the Catholic Men's Podcast, helping you find good works of literature for the Catholic gentleman. The Ghost of Love by Wallace O. Cheriton, from the book Unsolved Texas Mysteries. The chronicles of Texas legends contain many references to mysterious apparitions that are supposed to be the ghosts of Texans past. Texas ghosts, it seems, come in all varieties, sizes, and shapes. There are old cowboys, old Indians, old dogs, some unknown things, and plenty of eerie young women supposedly haunting various parts of Texas from the Panhandle to the Rio Grande. Some of the stories are fascinating, some ridiculous, but most are at least interesting. And some Texas ghosts have become virtual celebrities in their own right. Perhaps the most famous Texas ghost is the so-called Lady of White Rock Lake. Even though the mystery lady hasn't been seen lately, her legend lives on whenever folks get around to discussing ghosts. Some people refuse to believe the story, saying it's just another lady from a lake tale that's duplicated almost verbatim around the nation and even in other parts of the state. But those who have seen the White Rock Lady swear she is as real as you and I, except that she's a bit more transparent. Although there are many variations to the story, the best one involved a young couple, both employees of the famous Neiman Marcus department store, who were driving north on Garland Road in Dallas back in the 1930s. As they were passing White Rock Lake, a young lady suddenly appeared on the side of the road. The headlights of the car clearly showed the young woman was dressed in a fine gown and that she was soaked from head to foot. The couple stopped and asked if the stranger needed help. The young lady replied that she did, that there had been a terrible accident and she had ended up in the lake. She asked to be taken to a certain address in a fashionable part of East Dallas. As the mysterious hitchhiker got into the back seat, the lady in the front noticed that the passenger had good taste because she was wearing a gown that only recently had been sold at Neiman's. In fact, the lady in the car had actually used the very gown in a special window display. As the soaking wet passenger settled down into the back seat, the man put the car into gear and drove off. His wife, naturally concerned about the poor young girl, asked if there was anything she could do for her. When the mystery girl didn't answer, the lady turned to find that the girl had vanished, leaving only a very wet spot on the back seat. The man and his wife were naturally concerned about what had happened, so they decided to drive to the address supplied by the girl and see if they could gather any more information. An older man answered the bell at the house and, when told of the experience, explained that his only daughter had drowned sometime earlier in White Rock Lake. He also said 3 other people had supposedly picked her up in the previous 3 weeks and had come to his door seeking more information. When asked by the lady, the grief-stricken father said yes, his daughter did buy all her clothes at Neiman Marcus. What separates this ghost lady from most of the others is that she doesn't always try to hitchhike home. On many occasions, she simply walks up to the front door of one of the houses that ring the lake and asks to use the phone. She usually says there has been an accident and that she wants to call her father. Naturally, most people agree, but when they turn away for a second, the girl vanishes, leaving only a small puddle of water on the porch. The lady has also been seen just walking around the lake. When friend Charlie Eckert was in the business of upholding the law in Dallas, his partner Steve Wester claimed, and Charlie believed him, that he saw the mysterious lady walking near some wet marshes along the edge of the lake. And how did Wester know she was a ghost? She was walking over ground that was wet and sticky enough to bog down a small kitten, and yet the lady left absolutely no tracks. Whether real or imagined, fact or fiction, the Lady of White Rock Lake has achieved a sort of celebrity among Texas apparitions. Thanks to publicity over the years, the lady has become the queen of Texas spooks. Other ghosts, however, have never received much publicity at all, and thus are just drifting around out there somewhere, doing whatever it is that ghosts do. The ghost of love is a perfect example. At 10 o'clock on the morning of June 30th, 1903, Colonel R.M. Love, Comptroller for Public Accounts for the state of Texas, was in his office at the Capitol building chatting with Reverend M.F. Coden of Bonham. The friendly conversation was abruptly interrupted when W.G. Hill, a former state employee whom Love had dismissed, barged into the small office. The colonel, ever a gentleman, rose to greet Hill, shook his hand, and then introduced him to the minister. The three then took their seats and engaged in some small talk, mostly about Hill and his family. After a few moments, the minister decided to leave, but as he walked toward the door, Hill jumped from his seat and produced a 2-page note which he demanded Love read immediately. The colonel took the papers and began to read the curious words. "Dear Sir, public office is a public trust. Public offices are created for the service of the people and not for the aggrandizement of a few individuals. The practice of bartering department clerkships for private gain is a disgrace to the public service, and in the nefarious traffic you are a record breaker. You have robbed the state's employees, and your incompetent administration has permitted others to rob the state. The man who, claiming to be a Christian, deprives others of employment without cause is a base hypocrite and a tyrant. If the host of Democratic spoilsmen, politicians of this state, of the McGaughy, Love, Robbins, Sebastian, Roundtree type, had such a thing about them as a conscience and a healthy state of activity, they could not look a Republican in the face without blushing. The greatest mind that ever gave its wisdom to the world, the mind of all others most capable of umpiring the mutiny between right and wrong, said, 'You take my life when you do take from me the means by which I live. If that be true, you are a murderer of the deepest crimson hue. Although I cannot help myself, before laying life's burden down, I shall strike a blow, feeble though it be, for the good of my deserving fellowmen, for the right against the wrong, for the weak against the strong. Yours truly, W.G. Hill.'" Obviously, Mr. Hill blamed Colonel Love for all of what must have been a significant number of problems that stemmed from his unemployment. The carefully worded note seemed a clear indication that Hill wasn't intent on asking Love over to Sunday dinner. The words appear to indicate a premeditated plot to rid the state of its comptroller, and Love might have become instantly alarmed if he had had the chance to finish reading all the words. Hill did not give the colonel that chance. As Love read, the preacher brushed against Hill on his way into the adjoining office of Miss Allie Stanfield, Love's private stenographer. With no apparent warning other than the note, Hill drew a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver that he had borrowed from his son from his pocket. With careful aim, he pointed the gun at Love and fired once, hitting the comptroller in the chest. J.W. Stevens, chief bookkeeper for the state, was at his desk just inside a small office that adjoined Love's. When Stevens heard the shot, he dashed into the comptroller's office to come to the aid of Love. As Stevens charged, Hill squeezed off another round and shot Love a second time, also in the chest. As Love collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, Hill spun on his heels and tried to point the gun at Stevens. The bookkeeper reacted instinctively and ducked down low under Hill's arm and below the gun. As he reached the gunman, Stevens rose up, grabbed the gun with one hand and Hill with the other. The force of the attack sent both men sprawling backwards towards the door and onto the floor. As the pair rolled on the polished hardwood, each grappling for the gun, a third shot rang out. Reverend Cowden came back into the room when he heard the shots. He saw the two men lying on the floor, but he was unsure which one had been hit by the third bullet. There was a moment of suspense that would warm the heart of any Hollywood director, while both men just lay on the floor. After a few seconds, Stevens struggled to his feet, leaving Hill lying in a quickly expanding pool of his own blood. The assassin, realizing he was mortally wounded and destined to suffer an agonizing death, reached a trembling hand into his vest pocket and pulled out a small vial of laudanum, then thought to be a deadly poison. "Let me take this and die easy," Hill pleaded, but Stevens wouldn't hear of it. He snatched the bottle from Hill's hand and left the killer to suffer. It was later speculated that Hill had intended to take his own life after killing Love. As soon as the brief scuffle was over, Colonel Love struggled to his feet and tried to walk. He exclaimed, "I've been shot," and collapsed back to the floor. Reverend Cowden hurried to his friend's side and slipped a pillow under his head. According to the minister, Love looked up and said, "I am shot, but it is well with me. God bless you, and God bless him." Apparently, even though he probably knew the end was near, Colonel Love held no particular grudge for his assailant. Virtual pandemonium broke out in the capital. Several people rushed to the scene to do what they could for their fallen friend. A leather chair was used to extend the couch beside Love's desk, and he was gently raised into the makeshift bed and made as comfortable as possible while everyone awaited the arrival of a doctor. Aides scurried off to get blankets, pillows, water, whiskey, anything they could think of that might make the suffering easier. Hill, on the other hand, was roughly carried to the south side of the Capitol Rotunda and placed on a cot where he was left to wait, virtually without attention, for doctors to arrive. As Love lay on his couch, clutching one hand against the wounds to hold down the flow of blood, it became quickly clear to all present that the assassin had done his evil deed well. It was, everyone speculated, but a matter of a few moments before Love would be gone. That sentiment was echoed by the state health officer who arrived shortly after the shooting and examined Colonel Love. When informed that he was dying, the colonel asked for his stenographer so she could take down his last statement. Miss Stanfield complied, although she was on the verge of a breakdown. Love, speaking in a hushed voice, explained briefly what had happened and then concluded, "I have no idea why he shot me. May the Lord bless him and forgive him. I can say no more." News of the shooting spread quickly, and Love's wife, son, and sisters hurried to the capital to be with their beloved in the final moments. All arrived in time for Love to offer the prayer that they go in peace and that God protect them. Governor Latham also arrived on the scene in time for a final plea from Love. "I have but one request to make before the bullet of the assassin rushes me into the presence of God. Appoint Mr. Stevens to take charge of my official family." The kindness of the gentleman was evident to everyone, and not an eye in the room, including the governor's, was dry. At about 11:05 a.m., Colonel Love seemed for a moment to get better, but then he took a turn for the worse. A reporter for the Austin American-Statesman described what happened next. One slight movement of the hand, one muscular twitch of the lips, one unsuccessful effort to give the world and those around him a last parting word, and the soul of R.M. Love plumed its snowy pinions and sailed away to the pearly portals of paradise. As for Hill, although his wound was diagnosed as being fatal, his end did not come quite so quickly. He lived long enough to be transported to the Austin Sanitarium. Despite repeated requests for a statement to explain his actions, Hill refused to say other than, "He didn't treat me right." Just before 3 that afternoon, Mr. Hill's wound finally took its toll, and he expired. The brutal assassination of a high-ranking state official naturally sparked quite a controversy. Immediately, security was increased, and there was some call that the Capitol should be declared off-limits to anyone not having official business. One state employee even suggested that everyone entering the building ought to be frisked for guns or knives. Another suggestion was that no one would be admitted to the Capitol without an appointment, but that failed when it was pointed out that in all probability Love would have granted an appointment to Hill. As is always the case, the Love killing eventually slipped out of the category of current news and into the pages of Texas history. Unless something drastic happens, Colonel Love may be destined to enjoy the dubious distinction of being the only person assassinated in the state capitol. There is also some scant evidence that perhaps the colonel's spirit has yet to vacate the premises. Although some ghost hunters may claim otherwise, there never has been any specific criteria established to identify the exact conditions under which a person's ghost will be tied to the place of mortal death. In Love's case, however, there are circumstances which often seem to be justification for a spirit to remain. He was killed instantly and unexpectedly, which means he left behind some unfinished business. Since Love also never had the chance to read the fatal note, perhaps his spirit is still wandering around looking for the document so he can finally understand why he was killed. The best evidence of a ghost's presence has to be the eyewitness testimony from people who claim to have actually seen the apparition. In the case of Colonel Love, there have been sightings, but they have been few and far between. One such sighting was made by Bill Thornton of Dallas. While he will be the first to say he doesn't know exactly what he saw, Thornton will also swear he saw something that cannot be explained. It happened several years ago when the Thornton family was in Austin doing some sightseeing. During a late evening tour of the Capitol, Bill's daughter became separated from the group, and he went looking for her. A short distance down the east wing, near the office that had been occupied by Colonel Love, Bill encountered what he thought was either an employee or another tourist. The man was fairly short, about 5'8" or 9", and of slightly stocky build. He had dark hair and a large bushy mustache. He was dressed in a white shirt with tie and odd-looking trousers and shoes that seemed out of style. Without ever saying a word, the mystery man politely stepped aside when Thornton came close by and let him pass. Bill turned to look back down the corridor for any sign of his daughter, and he noticed the man had simply vanished into thin air. There were no doors or hallways into which the man could have escaped, and the hall was completely empty. The strange appearance startled Bill, and he reported immediately to the Capitol Police. The man on duty at the time sort of laughed and informed Bill he had probably seen Colonel R.M. Love, the ghost of the Capitol. Somewhat shaken, Bill gathered up his family and they left, determined to continue the Capitol tour at a later date in the daylight. Thornton's account of the supernatural sighting set the wheels of investigation into motion. Unfortunately, the trail of Love's ghost proved almost as elusive as the spirit itself. Not one of the current employees in the state capitol recalled ever seeing a ghost or even of hearing that one existed. Many of the younger Capitol employees said they weren't even aware that an assassination had taken place. Efforts to locate the guard that had given the information to Bill Thornton proved futile. A few longtime residents of Austin remembered hearing rumors many years ago that there was supposed to be a ghost in the Capitol. Unfortunately, none recalled that it was supposed to be the ghost of Love, and no one could remember any specific details. It appeared the trail was dead-ended, but then a tip led to a man who had worked in the Capitol for many years before moving on to a railroad job. The man, who preferred that his name not be used, claimed that he often worked late in the Capitol and did, on rare occasions, see something strange. He said that what appeared to be a man would occasionally be seen walking the East Corridor at about the same spot where Bill Thornton had had his close encounter. The witness said he had always heard that the man was the ghost of Colonel Love, but that whenever he tried to talk about it, his co-workers always seemed to laugh and make fun. Finally, the man decided to simply keep his mouth shut. He also decided whenever possible to avoid the East Wing at night like a hog might avoid an electric fence. Although the supposed ghost never said or did anything frightening, the man concluded, "I never did see no future in taking unnecessary chances." So, what is the truth? If there is no ghost lurking in the halls of the Capitol, then what did Bill Thornton and the former Capitol employee see? In either case, the ghost is perhaps the shyest in recorded history. Whatever the truth is, the possible ghost of the Capitol is certainly one of the strangest stories and best-kept secrets in all of Texas. If you or someone you know has seen something strange in the state capitol at Austin, or has any other pertinent information that might help solve this mystery, please contact the author at Wordware Publishing. End of The Ghost of Love by Wallace O. Cheriton. I didn't know there was supposed to be a ghost in the capital of Texas, and I also had forgotten that Colonel Love had been assassinated. So, if anything, this legend can keep alive the story of the assassination of Colonel Love, which is really important for people living in Texas. And I expect that's why they named Dallas Love Field after him, to keep his memory alive. So here's to you, Colonel Love. May you rest in peace. Amen. Thank you for listening, and Godspeed.